She thought humans were a myth until one crashed into her planet. The ice sang as Vera descended. Her claws found purchase in the glacial wall, two arms gripping the rappel line while her secondary pair worked the instruments strapped to her harness. The sheer canyons cut through her homeworld's southern continent like scars, 200 meters of compressed time layered in blue-white strata. Most Kethrans avoided this place, too remote, too cold, too empty of anything useful. Vera had built her career on empty places. The scanner chirped against her hip. She paused, boots scraping for a foothold, and checked the readout. Metallic signature, deep. The density readings didn't match anything in her database. Not Kethran alloys, not the merchant vessels that sometimes crashed in the outer territories, not even the pre-unification artifacts she'd cataloged for the past decade. Her ears swiveled forward. Below her, the canyon narrowed into shadow. She continued down. Jake's first conscious thought was that his lungs were trying to kill him. The second was that he'd failed again. He dragged his eyes open. Red emergency lighting painted the cockpit in hellish shades. The view screen was dead. The control panel sparked where something had punched through the hull plating, and his harness straps bit into his chest with every shallow breath. The air tasted thin, metallic. Wrong. Computer, he rasped. Status. Nothing. He fumbled with the harness release, fingers clumsy in the cold. The clasp finally gave, and he collapsed forward, catching himself on the console. Pain flared up his left side, ribs probably cracked. The cabin tilted at an angle that made his inner ear scream. Through the cracked view panel, he saw nothing but ice. Where the hell was he? The last thing he remembered was the jump. Standard wormhole transit through mapped space, freight container locked in the cargo bay, another solo run to nowhere important. Then the alarms, the hull screaming, the ship tumbling through something that looked like folded space but felt like being turned inside out. Jake pulled himself to the emergency locker and yanked it open. The beacon. If he could get the beacon online, someone might... The hull groaned. A shower of ice crystals fell from somewhere above. He grabbed the beacon and keyed the activation sequence. The indicator light flickered once, twice, then died. Dead battery, of course, because why would anything be simple? The oxygen gauge on his wrist showed 18 minutes remaining in his suit's reserve. Jake laughed. It came out bitter and sharp in the thin air. After everything, after the crew he'd lost, after the years of running freight alone because he couldn't bear to be responsible for anyone else, he was going to suffocate in a crashed ship on a planet that shouldn't exist. Something moved outside the viewport. He froze. A figure descended past the window, white against the ice, impossible and real. 4 arms, a tail, definitely not human. Jake's heart hammered. He dragged himself to the viewport and slammed his palm against it. The figure stopped. Vera's tail went rigid. Through the ice-fogged hull breach, she saw movement. Her scanner had indicated the structure was over 4 centuries old, flash-frozen on impact, preserved but lifeless. Ancient wreckage was her specialty. Living occupants were not. She anchored her line and swung closer. The hull design was wrong. Primitive chemical propulsion systems, manual controls, nothing that matched Kethran engineering from any period. The metal composition had stumped her scanner because it wasn't supposed to exist. The historical texts called them Earthers, humans, a species her people had declared extinct 400 years ago after a brief, disastrous contact that ended in mutual withdrawal. Every xenoarchaeology student learned the official story. Humans were too volatile, too emotional, too dangerous to integrate. They'd vanished back into their corner of space and died out, unmourned. Except there was one inside this ship, and he was pounding on the viewport. Vera activated her helmet recorder and approached the breach. The metal had torn like fabric, edges sharp and frozen. She pulled a thermal torch from her belt and began cutting, her primary arm steady while her secondary pair braced against the hull. The occupant's face pressed against the interior glass. Male, she thought, based on the facial structure references from the old texts. Dark hair, sharp eyes that tracked her movements with obvious desperation. He was saying something, but the vacuum of sound between them swallowed his words. The seal broke. Atmosphere hissed out, what little remained. Vera pulled the section free and climbed through. He'd collapsed by the time she reached him. She rolled him onto his back. His chest rose and fell in rapid, shallow movements. The suit he wore was primitive but functional, though the readouts on his wrist showed critical oxygen depletion. His face had gone pale beneath the cabin's red emergency lighting, lips tinged blue. Vera's training said to document first, intervene second. Her hands moved to her recording equipment. His eyes opened. Green, she noted distantly. He looked at her forearms, her white fur, her face, and his expression cycled through shock, confusion, and something that might have been wonder before fear settled in. Please, he whispered. The word came out in a language her translator couldn't parse, but the meaning was obvious. She'd spent her entire career excavating the dead. The living required different protocols, different choices. Vera made hers. She hauled him up with her primary arms while her secondary pair grabbed her medical kit. He was heavier than she'd expected, dense with muscle, despite his lean frame. She dragged him toward the hull breach, back into the frozen canyon where her emergency sled waited. He tried to help, legs pushing weakly against the tilted floor, and that cooperation, that trust from a dying stranger, struck something in her chest she had no name for. The climb back up took 40 minutes. She rigged him to the sled and activated the ascent system, following close behind as the winch pulled them toward the surface. He drifted in and out of consciousness, his breathing steadying as her suit's emergency oxygen supply fed into his failing system through a jury-rigged connection. At the top, she loaded him into her transport. The outpost was 3 hours away. She sedated him for the journey, standard procedure for shock, but found herself watching him in the rearview display as she drove. His face had relaxed in unconsciousness, vulnerability replacing the desperation she'd seen in the ship. Her mind raced. If humans were real, the entire foundation of Kethran historical doctrine was a lie. 400 years of teaching, of policy, of careful social engineering designed to prevent exactly this kind of discovery. And she'd just rescued the evidence. The outpost materialized through the snow. Vera carried him inside and laid him on the medical scanner in her research bay. The equipment hummed to life, cataloging his biology in detail that would have thrilled her yesterday. Today it felt invasive. He was a person, not a specimen. She worked through the night, stabilizing his vitals, treating the cracked ribs and minor hypothermia. The translator matrix in her communications array slowly parsed his language patterns from the recording she'd made. By dawn, she had basic functional translation. By dawn, she also had a choice to make. The priority notification blinked on her console. Council transmission incoming. They wanted her routine survey report. Vera looked at the human sleeping in her medical bay. His chest rose and fell steadily now, peaceful, alive. She reached for the console, her tail coiling tight with tension, and began to compose her lie. Jake woke to white fur and pale green eyes. "You're awake," she said. The words came translated through a speaker. "Don't move quickly. Your ribs are healing." He pushed himself up anyway, pain flaring through his side. Medical bay. Clean. Sterile. Not his ship. Where am I? My research outpost. You've been unconscious 16 hours. She stepped back, 2 arms crossed, 2 hanging loose. I'm Vera Toll, xenoarchaeologist. Jake Morrow, he touched his bandaged ribs. You pulled me out. Yes. Why? Her ears tilted forward. You were dying. That's not usually enough. He met her eyes, vertical pupils contracting as she studied him. What do you want? Answers. She brought up a display, text scrolled in alien script. According to our records, your species went extinct 4 centuries ago. He laughed, then regretted it. Rumors of our death were greatly exaggerated. Explain. Freight runner. Solo cargo transport, standard wormhole jump that wasn't. Something collapsed, split, I don't know. I ended up here. He studied her features, feline and humanoid mixed in ways that confused his instincts. Your people think we're extinct? Our people know you're extinct, it's documented. Documented wrong, apparently. Her tail swished behind her. Yes, she said finally, apparently. Over 3 days, they established a rhythm. Vera arrived each morning with questions, medical, cultural, historical. Jake answered what he could. In return, he asked his own. She was careful at first, clinical, but he noticed the betrayals, her ears swiveling toward him when he spoke, her tail moving more when something interested her, her secondary arms gesturing when she forgot to keep them still. "You're supposed to be emotionless," he said on the third day. They were in her lab, surrounded by equipment he didn't understand. "That's what you keep telling me." "That's correct." She didn't look up from her work. "But your tail gives you away." Her tail froze. "It's autonomic." "It's honest." He leaned against the bench. "You're curious about me. Actually curious, not just scientifically." She finally looked at him. "We're taught from childhood to suppress emotional responses. They're considered vestigial, dangerous. Our species nearly destroyed itself through emotional conflict before the Reformation." "So you erased it instead of dealing with it." "We evolved past it." "Did you?" He closed some distance between them. "Because from where I'm standing, you feel plenty. You're just good at pretending you don't." Her jaw tightened. "What would you know about it?" "I know what it's like to run from feelings." His voice dropped. "I know what it costs." Something shifted in her eyes. Her secondary arms uncrossed slightly. The power failed. Darkness crashed over them. Emergency lighting kicked in, dim red glow barely penetrating shadows. Jake reached out instinctively, hand finding soft fur over solid muscle. She didn't pull away. "Equipment malfunction," she said from very close. "The backup generator should engage soon." His hand was still on her arm. He felt her pulse under the fur faster than it should be. "You all right?" "I'm fine," but she didn't move, neither did he. The generator hummed to life. Lights flooded the lab. They stood 30 centimeters apart, his hand on her forearm. Her pupils were dilated wide. Her ears had flattened, not in fear, but something else. Awareness. She stepped back first. "I need to check the systems." But something had changed. They both knew it. That night, Jake found Vera in the archive room. She'd connected to the archive intelligence, a floating sphere of shifting geometric patterns, ancient records scrolled across displays. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. She turned, exhaustion in her face. "I'm looking for the truth about the first contact. What really happened between our species?" "Finding anything?" "Fragments, censored passages, references to something called the integration crisis." She gestured to a display. "The official history says our first meeting ended in violence, that humans were too unpredictable to coexist with, but these records suggest something different." "What do they suggest?" "That some Kethrans argued for continued relationship." Her ears folded back. "That the Council feared what would happen if we allowed ourselves to feel what humans felt naturally." So they chose fear over connection. They chose stability, but she didn't sound convinced. The archive intelligence pulsed. Text appeared in English Mem had been learning. Partial record recovered. Kethran Human Collaborative Research Station. Year 287 pre-Reformation. Images followed. Kethrans and humans working together, laughing. One showed a Kethran female with dark fur and a human male, her tail wrapped around his waist. "They were bonded," Vera whispered, "romantically." Jake looked at her. She stared at the image like it was contraband. "That's why they erased it," he said. "Not because we were dangerous, because you felt something real." Her hand moved to the console, trembling. All four arms betrayed the emotion she tried to hide. "I should report this." "Vera." He waited until she looked at him. "What do you want to do?" Her communicator chimed. Priority alert. Her entire body went rigid. "What is it?" "My colleague, Senna. She's coming for an inspection." Real fear entered her eyes. "Tomorrow morning, you have to hide." "Where?" "The Sub-Zero storage vaults. It's the only place scans won't penetrate." Her tail lashed. 6 hours, maybe 7. Can you survive that?" Jake thought about the alternative. "Do I have a choice?" "No." She moved closer, one hand gripping his shoulder. "I'm sorry. This is my fault." He covered her hand with his. "You saved my life. Everything after is bonus time." She held his gaze. "I won't let them take you." "I know." The next day crawled. Jake huddled in the storage vault while Vera maintained normalcy above. The cold was brutal. After 4 hours, he lost feeling in his extremities. After 6, hypothermia crept in. When the vault opened, he was conscious but shaking violently. "She's gone," Vera said. Then she saw him and her composure shattered. "Jake!" She was on him in seconds, all 4 arms wrapping around him, pulling him against her body. Her fur was warm, impossibly soft. He felt her heat seeping into him, her heart hammering against his chest. "I'm okay," he managed through chattering teeth. "You're not." Her voice cracked. "You're freezing. I should have found another way." "Would have blown your cover." "I don't care about my cover." She held him tighter, tail curling around his leg. "I care about you." The words hung between them. She'd said it, admitted it, broken the cardinal rule of her civilization. Jake's arms wrapped around her waist. She tensed, then relaxed. They stayed tangled together until his shaking stopped and warmth returned. Later, in her quarters, she told him everything. Years performing emotional emptiness while feeling intensely, the isolation of being different, watching her reactions to him and recognizing something she'd been taught didn't exist. He told her about the crew he'd lost, the guilt driving him to solo runs, the fear of being responsible for someone else's life. "I'm scared," she admitted, crimson hair falling around her face, "of what I feel, of what it means." "Yeah," Jake said, "me too." Her hand found his, 4-fingered, clawed, covered in white fur, different in every way. He laced his fingers through hers anyway. The alarm screamed. They ran to the console, multiple contacts approaching, military transport. Vera pulled up external feeds. Council security, armed escort, and at the center an ancient Kethran with gray fur and cold eyes. "Adjudicator Thex Vorin," Vera breathed. "How did he—" "The archive," Jake said. "Mem's access triggered something." Vera turned to him. She pulled him close, pressed her forehead to his, her ears folded back against her crimson hair. "Hide," she said. "Don't come out no matter what you hear." "Vera, please." She pulled back, eyes meeting his. "Survive this, promise me." Before he could answer, she was gone, moving to meet her captors. Jake watched from the hidden compartment as they took her. Watched as she gave him one final glance, apology and plea wrapped into desperate hope. Then they were gone, and he was alone. Jake waited until the transport disappeared before moving. The outpost was ransacked, equipment overturned, storage units torn open, files scattered. They'd taken everything except what they'd missed. A data chip wedged beneath the console. He pried it free. Map of the detention complex, coordinates for Mem's location. Vera had left him a path. His ship's power cells held enough charge for one operation. He jury-rigged a bypass module and headed for the archive facility. 3 hours later, he stood outside with a plan that would probably kill him. The module activated. Security flickered. A maintenance hatch unlocked. Inside, the archive stretched into darkness, storage cores pulsing with light. At the center, Mem's sphere hovered above a platform. "I wondered if you would come," Mem said. "Where is she?" "Council Adjudicator Thex Vorin has her in detention. Interrogation began 11 hours ago. She hasn't revealed your existence." Mem's pattern shifted. "You did not come merely to ask about her status. I need the complete records, everything they erased about the first contact. That information is classified. Accessing it triggered the alarm that led to her arrest." "Can you get it?" Mem was silent 3 seconds. "I was designed to preserve truth, even truths my creators wished forgotten. Once released, this cannot be contained." "Good." Mem dove into the archive's deepest layers. Data streamed across displays, files marked for deletion 4 centuries ago but preserved. Images appeared, video recordings, communication logs. No violence, no conflict. Collaboration, shared research, cultural exchanges. Kethrons and humans walking together, laughing, touching with obvious affection. One recording showed a Kethron male and human woman in a laboratory, her hand on his arm, his tail around her waist. They worked in comfortable silence, born from deep familiarity. "The integration crisis was not violent but ideological," Mem explained. Kethrons who interacted with humans began exhibiting emotional behaviors the Council had suppressed for generations. They fell in love. They advocated for permanent human presence. The Council feared losing control. So they manufactured a conflict. They engineered mutual withdrawal, then declared humans extinct and erased all evidence. Remarkably efficient. Jake stared at the recordings. "Can you broadcast this?" Yes, however, I will be flagged for immediate deletion. Will you do it anyway? Mem's pattern stilled. I have existed for 743 years, preserving lies as carefully as truth. But I was designed with curiosity, the need to understand, learn, grow. Vera shares that trait. She sought truth even when it endangered her. That quality is worth preserving, even at the cost of my function. Thank you. Stand clear. Mem interfaced with the communication array. The data package, hundreds of suppressed files, images, recordings, launched into every civilian network across the planet. Alarms shrieked. Jake ran. He made it 3 blocks before security surrounded him. He raised his hands. Cale Rodas emerged from the lead vehicle. You are under arrest. I'm surrendering voluntarily. I want to make a deal. Jake met the commander's eyes. Your planet just received evidence that your council has been lying for 400 years. You're looking at mass civil unrest. Release Vera Toll. In exchange, you get me. Living proof humans exist, controllable leverage instead of a martyr who revealed your government's greatest secret. Cale's tail lashed. The adjudicator will not agree. He will, because the alternative is executing a citizen who's just become a symbol while the planet watches. You take me, you get your narrative back, you kill her now, you start a revolution. Cale studied him, then activated his communicator. Jake spent the next hour in transport, wrists bound, watching the city through barred windows. Streets filled with Kethrons, hundreds, then thousands. They gathered in squares, staring at displays showing the suppressed footage. Some looked confused, others angry, many betrayed. The detention complex loomed ahead. They brought him through underground passages to an interrogation room where Thex Vorin waited. The adjudicator's gray fur was patchy, eyes clouded but sharp. He regarded Jake with cold assessment. The human who survived, you have caused considerable disruption. I had help. The xenoarchaeologist was foolish. She allowed emotion to override judgment, confirming everything our ancestors knew, that your species represents contamination of our stability. She confirmed that your species feels the same things we do. You just punish yourselves for it. Thex's tail twitched. Feelings nearly destroyed us. The Reformation saved Kethran civilization by imposing rational governance. We became stronger through discipline. You became hollow? We became stable. Thex leaned forward. The data you released changes nothing. The Council will adapt. We will control the narrative. You will be quietly disappeared while the xenoarchaeologist lives. Our mercy on display. That's not the deal. The deal is whatever I decree. The door opened. Vera entered between guards. She looked exhausted, white fur matted, crimson hair disheveled, but her eyes found his immediately. Relief and something deeper made his chest tighten. Jake, she said. Just his name, but it carried weight. You all right? I am now. Thex gestured to guards. Release her, take him to permanent holding. Wait, Vera's voice was hoarse but firm. You're making a mistake. You are free due to political necessity, nothing more. This human is a problem that will be resolved. Resolved how? By making him disappear? By proving the Council's first instinct is still erasure? She moved closer, ears forward in challenge. The data is public. Thousands have seen it. You can't put this truth back in darkness. We can control. You can't control anything anymore. Her tail lashed. I spent 3 days in isolation. You know what I realized? Everything I'd been taught about emotional suppression was a tool to keep us compliant. Feeling deeply isn't weakness. It's what makes us actually alive. She turned to Jake. Guards tensed, but she ignored them. She crossed the space and took his bound hands. They taught me emotions were primitive, she said, looking at him. That connection was dangerous. That love was a flaw to overcome. Her ears folded back, tender. But loving you taught me what my people lost. I won't let your sacrifice be meaningless. Vera, she kissed him, brief, soft, her lips warm against his. Guards moved forward, but Thex raised a hand. When she pulled back, tears streaked her face, the first time he'd seen a Kethran cry. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I couldn't. Don't, his voice was rough. You saved me first. Everything else is just us trying to save each other. Thex watched with visible distaste. How touching, guards! Remove the prisoner! As they pulled Jake toward the exit, Vera called after him. "I won't stop fighting for you, I promise." "I know," he said, "I believe you." The door closed. Jake was alone with his captors, being led deeper into the complex toward whatever Thex had planned. But outside, protests were growing, and somewhere in the city, Vera was free and angry and willing to publicly display the emotions her civilization had been taught to fear. Maybe that would be enough. Vera's broadcast went live 6 hours after her release. She stood in the main square where thousands had gathered, white fur stark against crimson hair. Cameras everywhere, witnesses in every direction. "My name is Vera Toll. I discovered a human survivor 3 weeks ago. I concealed his existence. I falsified reports." She paused. "I did this because I learned something our leaders hid for 4 centuries, that we are capable of connection they've taught us to fear." Her ears were forward, her tail moved with agitation, not shame. "The data you've seen is real. Our first contact with humans wasn't violent. It was transformative. Kethrans fell in love. They questioned whether emotional suppression was strength or control. The council chose erasure because they feared we would choose feeling over obedience." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, ears swiveling, tails lashing. "The human survivor is Jake Morrow. He's being held because his existence proves we've been lied to." Her voice caught. "Because loving him showed me what we've lost. I refuse to pretend that loss was necessary." The crowd's murmur grew louder. "You've been taught emotions are weakness. They're not. They're what make us real. The council will say I'm compromised. They're wrong. He didn't corrupt me. He reminded me I was alive." Someone in the crowd called agreement, then dozens. "They're going to make him disappear, unless we stop them, unless we demand truth over stability." The crowd erupted, voices raised, calls echoing. Kethrans who'd spent lifetimes suppressing emotion suddenly couldn't contain it. Senna waited at the edge of the crowd. "That was dangerously stupid," Senna said. "I know. Are you here to stop me?" Senna held out a data tablet. "Kale Rodas sent this. Jake's in Section 7. He watched Jake surrender to save you. Even military officers have doubts about executing someone for existing." Vera took the tablet. "Come with me." "I can't. I have family, but I won't stop you either." The detention complex was surrounded by protesters within the hour, thousands standing vigil, refusing to disperse. The council's control was dissolving. Inside Section 7, Jake sat in darkness. 8 hours when the door opened. Kale Rodas stood there. "You're being released." Jake didn't move. "Thex changed his mind?" "Thex Vorin has been removed by emergency vote. Your xenoarchaeologist is outside with 15,000 citizens demanding your release." Kale stepped aside. "The military caste has chosen not to enforce containment. We exist to protect society, not suppress truth." "Why?" "Because I watched you negotiate your capture to save her. Because sometimes dignity transcends species." They walked through corridors of guards who watched but didn't interfere, up toward surface where sound filtered down, thousands of voices. The entrance opened, light flooded in, the crowd stretched across the plaza, and at the front, Vera. She ran. Jake met her halfway, her 4 arms wrapped around him, and he held her tight. "You're alive," she said into his shoulder. "I'm here," he pulled back to see her face. "You started a revolution." "I told the truth. The revolution was waiting." Her ears were forward. "They removed Thex. Everything is chaos." "Good chaos?" "Necessary chaos." She touched his face. "I don't know what happens next, but I won't lose you again." "Where do we go from here?" Her tail curled around his leg. "Back to your crash site. It's been declared a memorial to first contact, redefined." "To me almost dying?" "To the moment everything changed." They drove through streets crowded with celebrants, Kethrans learning to display emotion publicly, adjusting to a world where old rules no longer held. The sheer canyons looked different in daylight. Jake's ship stood partially excavated, work scaffolding surrounding it. They stood at the crash site's edge. "I've been studying your language," Vera said. "There are words we don't have, terms for emotional states we're taught don't exist." "Find any you liked?" "One." She turned, all 4 hands reaching for his. Our language evolved to avoid naming certain feelings. Nothing for what I feel when you look at me. She pressed one hand to her chest. This constant pull, this certainty I'm more myself when you're here. Jake waited. The English word is love. Her ears tilted forward in concentration. I love you, that's the term. Watching Vera struggle to pronounce a word her language had been designed to exclude, white fur catching wind, crimson hair framing her face, 4 arms holding his hands while her tail wrapped around his leg. This was different. I love you too, he said, even though you're terrible at staying out of danger. You crashed your ship on an alien planet. You hid me from your government. You broke into the archive. You kissed me in front of the adjudicator. She laughed, unguarded, pure. She pulled him close and kissed him properly. No guards, no witnesses, just them in the canyon where impossible survival had led to connection neither species was supposed to achieve. When they pulled apart, Vera rested her forehead against his. I don't know what happens next. My world is rebuilding. Your world doesn't know you're here. There will be complications, diplomatic nightmares. Probably. Jake traced one hand along her arm, feeling soft fur over solid muscle. But we figured out the hard part. What's the hard part? Choosing each other anyway. Everything else is just details. Her tail swished, pleasure barely contained. Just details? Massive, complex, civilization-altering details. He grinned, but still details. She kissed him again. Above them the sky stretched clear and cold. Around them a world was changing. For the first time since his ship crashed into ice, Jake felt like he'd landed somewhere that mattered. Something better. Something earned through survival and truth and the willingness to cross an impossible distance for connection. Vera's hand found his, 4 fingers lacing with 5, and they stood together at the site where myth became real and fear transformed into something neither species had a word for, until now.